Welcome to the Juniper podcast, where we talk about the more nuanced aspects of having a pet with some of the most interesting people in the pet space. I'm your host, Allison, the founder of Juniper, and I'm joined by Haley, writer from Juniper. Take us along on your daily dog walk, and don't forget to sign up for Juniper. It's free, and you'll get access to articles, guides, and discounts on the best pet brands and more at www.juniperpet.co. Let's get into it.
Hello and welcome to the Juniper Dog Moms podcast. We're Haley and Allison here with Kassidi Jones, the content creator behind Ginger's Naps on Instagram and at gingers-naps.com. She's dog mom to Ginger, a PhD candidate in African American Studies and English, and she's known for being one of the most impactful anti-racist animal advocates online. I've personally followed her for years, and I have learned so much, and I am thrilled to be talking to you today. This is so exciting. So first off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Ginger? We know a little, but for everyone listening, brief how you came to adopt her, what your favorite thing to do together is?
Yes, about myself. I'm a Pisces sun, Pisces rising, Cancer moon. Exciting. That's always how I lead. Ginger, she just turned 4 a couple weeks ago. Her breed, up in the air. I got her from a shelter that doesn't do breed labeling. People on the internet have called her a lot of things, mainly black-mouthed cur. That's what we get the most of. A lot of people assume there's some pit in there. This morning I was walking her and my neighbor's dog, who look about the same, but Chloe's 10 years older than her. So they just look like one another from the past and future. And a man on the street insisted that I was walking 2 German Shepherds. And I said, neither one of them are German Shepherds. And he said, no, they're definitely part German Shepherd. And so I just let him have it. Anything you identify her as is fine.
I'm a huge Chloe fan too, but I can't see the German Shepherd in either of them. That's an amazing story.
Neither one of them at all. But it's fine. You know, a man's going to insist that he knows your dog better than you. That's cool. Okay, you have it. How did I come to adopt her? I adopted her in 2020 from that shelter right outside of Philly with my partner at the time. It was mostly his idea, but as soon as we brought her home, she was my dog. So she has been my dog ever since. And she was kind of a gift to myself for getting through my oral summer, my comprehensive exam summer, which I had to read 150 books in 3 or 4 months, and then get quizzed on them by 5 people at the same time for 2 hours. And so I survived, and I had a Ginger to recognize that survival. My favorite thing to do with her, well, we live in Connecticut now. I grew up in Connecticut. I left for school and undergrad, came back for school again. Yeah, a lot of back and forth. But I realized just how little of the state I'd seen. And now that Ginger is here with me, I have more incentive to get out and find new places for us to explore, make sure she's getting her enrichment. Because that's what I learned from Haley more than anything. I can find new ways to keep her life exciting, and I should give her a lot of agency in what that looks like. So we just try new things a lot.
I love that. And I feel like you'll always kind of remember the summer of reading 150 books with your dog. I love that idea that these things that we go through, we're going to have these memories forever of like how our dog was with us through them. I love that for you. It sounds rough though. And congratulations with all the work you're doing, because I don't think I could ever get through a PhD.
I still have another year, so we'll see if I do it.
We went into some of this, but I would love to know like how Ginger has impacted your work with anti-racist animal advocacy. I think for those who don't know and haven't seen your content yet, I almost think it's like watching a documentary and learning so much from a 2-minute Instagram clip. And I think the reason that it's so great is because there's clearly so much work and research behind what you're putting out. And I love that because I feel like, you know, Haley and I have talked a lot about like, what are we even doing on social media? Why are we spending our time on this? We're losing so much time to this, and just always questioning I almost feel it's like a subhead of this podcast. But your content really stands out because it's so well researched. So would just love to know sort of like, how did you get started with that? And how did it come together for everything between what you're writing and learning about with your PhD program and then putting it in this digestible but really smart way on Instagram?
Woof, that was a learning process. And it's still a learning process. So I wasn't thinking about any of this at all before I got a dog. I wanted a dog my whole life, but I had never really considered how my life and my identities would influence my relationship to a dog until I got to grad school. One of the chapters of my dissertation is about Black folks and animals, or Black poetry and animals in the 19th century. And there are lots of different kinds of animals that pop up, but dogs pop up frequently, and not just in the poetry, but also in like speeches and in narratives written by enslaved people. And all the genres have some sort of mention of dogs. And I want to know more about why. And so I did my little nerd thing, which is pulling books, articles, whatever I can find to answer my question. And then because I had this Instagram account, which had basically no followers and was just pictures of Ginger at that point. I had only had her for about a month, but it was my account. I can talk about whatever I want. So if I want to sit there and talk about the book that I just read, I will. And people responded really well to it because just like I had never heard about any of those things, a lot of people had never heard about any of those things and thought it was interesting to think about. Since then, I consider the account to be like a library where people can just kind of come and take what they need when they need it. And it exists. And I don't have to spend every day, every minute of every day trying to stock it. I just try to put as much value into each piece of content that I make so that it'll be useful for weeks, months, years to come. You know, the internet has a short attention span, but I try to make sure these are things that can last a long time. And the way that I do that is by spending so much time on the research and making sure everything holds up. In terms of making it accessible, I think that comes from teacher training. Part of the PhD program, we get teacher training, and I learned how to talk to people who have never seen the things that I'm showing them before, and to do so in a way that makes them feel comfortable learning uncomfortable things. So I just apply that to the internet as well. And the reactions are sometimes different, but I do think the strategy has been helpful in terms of building the community we've built.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I admire most about you, among many, is that you talk about all of these hard truths that the pet community needs to hear, and you also welcome people in so openly. And I have learned so much from you, and I have realized mistakes I've made and things that I'm not proud of as a result. And you do such an incredible job of just being so almost ludicrously graceful and thoughtful and nuanced in everything that you present. But I think that that's so hard, especially on the social media space, and especially as time goes on. Even just in the last handful of years, I feel like so often the discourse on any given topic is a lot of yelling and a lot of extreme statements and a lot of people getting defensive before they've even read what you're putting out there. And navigating that so well is not easy, and it's also so valuable. Can you share a little bit more about what that has been like, different ways that the experience of being online has maybe pushed you to grow in other areas?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for those words, first and foremost. But also, this Instagram experiment, which is ongoing, has been partially therapeutic. I feel that part of the reason I ended up collecting all of these degrees in the same things in my 20s, I spent my whole 20s in school basically, is because there were things that I didn't have language for that I was experiencing when I was younger. I went to private schools, 2 private schools, first public school, then 2 private schools. And there was a tension there that I couldn't name, but I felt, and it was very heavy. And I was made to feel kind of like I was crazy for trying to give voice for struggling to cope with these things that, again, I could feel were happening, but I couldn't really describe. So then I went to college, I've been in grad school, and I have developed more of a vocabulary to describe what I'm talking about. And every time I get on the internet and make a claim about anti-Blackness and my experience as a Black woman, as a Black dog mom, and I'm able to back it up with all of this research and data, it's a lot harder to just shut me down, which is what I felt like I was experiencing as a child. That has been really great for my development, to kind of be able to assure myself that what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling is real. There's historical context, and that not everything is my fault. That's really what I had to learn.
Yeah, I mean, you find people who have experienced something similar or people who haven't, but can hold empathy for that because maybe they have some other kind of similar-ish experience or something, or they're just at the point where they're like willing to listen and learn from people. And then you also see like the worst of the worst with people coming out and all of that. So I think like it's pretty amazing how you've sort of like created how you want to do this work. And like I feel like you have real ownership of your content. And like what I mean by that is sort of like this is your space. Like right, like it seems like you're really living in like this is my page. So if it's not good for you, you can take your breaks. If you're really busy with your PhD, you can come back in a few months and drop another like amazing video that's going to blow everybody's minds. I feel like maybe this is where things are going too with really great content creation on the internet in general, but especially in the pet space, I found it really valuable because I feel like I'm taking a college class by watching one of your videos, you know, and actually learning. Whereas I feel like so much else that I'm scrolling through is just like meant for quick consumption, something cute, something fun, something to get me angry, something to flare this up, you know? And I wonder if maybe everybody feels that exhaustion from that and will be seeking out content that's more thoughtful like this and less, you know, of a throwaway. So thank you so much for the work you do there. And like, we have other questions for you other than just social media, but I do think that that's like really interesting how you've done that. So you write a lot, and I would encourage people to go read the pinned post on your Instagram page and also on your website. But you write about a lot of the like hard truths the pet community needs to hear about racism in the pet industry, how it's holding back the mission of like making dogs' lives better, people's lives better, and how intertwined those things are. Can you share a little bit more about how you think racism in the pet industry is sort of like holding everybody back? Because I also think it's interesting that you write a lot about how these two things are intertwined. Like we have to support people and making things better for people, and that will in turn support animals.
Absolutely. I love how passionate people are about animal work, animal welfare, animal rescue, whatever term people like to use. And I just think about how beautiful the world could be if we could apply that same passion, that energy to a broader group, maybe including our other human beings around that could also use our help. If you look around, it's harder to find on the internet these days, but at least the CARE organization is documenting it regularly. I think it's Care for Equity, their Instagram handle. They're one group of many that does research about the experiences of people of the global majority that work in rescue, and it's hard for them. They have a difficult time on top of the stress of working in animal rescue, because everybody that works in any type of shelter rescue will tell you that they're exhausted. There's just so much work to be done. On top of that, though, people that are not white have to deal with microaggressions. The burdens of, well, for Black folks, anti-Blackness can be really distracting and also very laborious. When we exclude people who would like to be involved, who would like to adopt, who would like to volunteer, but we make them feel uncomfortable or unsafe doing so because we tell them things that make them uncomfortable or angry, or because we assume that they don't know what they're doing, or we assume the worst intentions, then we lose people that we need for the mission. The mission needs manpower, and we're cutting out a lot of it by saying that only affluent white people are allowed to participate, only middle-class white families are allowed to adopt. There are a lot more homes in the world, and a lot more animals that need homes would have homes if we would open our minds and our hearts to people that don't look like us. Well, people that look like me. If we bring them into the fold, then we do more of the mission work, the animal saving work that we're looking to do. I also think that, well, you've seen it. The dog community can be very narrow and rigid in terms of what good pet parenting looks like and what it costs, for real. And there are a lot of happy dogs that don't have the things that we say need to be done. So if we could be a little more accepting, and if not accepting, because not everything is great for dogs, and there are things that need to change, absolutely. But changing people's mind isn't going to happen by telling them they're bad and then never letting them have a dog. First of all, because they're going to get a dog anyway. So if we could use some of those resources and that attention toward putting out education that is accessible and friendly and welcoming and culturally sensitive, again, I think we would see more of the changes we say we want to see.
Yeah, I notice a lot of coded bias in rescue things. And sometimes it can be so seemingly slight. like just mentioning that the dog's owner abandoned them, dropped them off. The dog can do sit in Spanish. It's like, why? I know maybe that is important to know because they're not going to understand sit in English, but it's just like, what are we really saying behind this? It's just like, oh, that wasn't a good home for what reason? Like, there's just so much of this. Or, insinuating that you can only get a dog if you have a fenced in yard, which is something that I thought for a long time. Like, we didn't get a dog when we had an apartment because I thought that. Turns out having a fenced in yard is like really, really great. But like, if you're Haley, and I have talked about this on past episodes, Haley's living in a van and making it work. How many walks can you go on? What is your lifestyle like? Like, these are more important questions than just what does your real estate situation look like? And, we're talking about dogs that are sitting in kennels and shelters. Like, a room is better than that with someone that they love. That's great. But there's so much of this that I've even picked up on. So I'm not surprised to see that there's like tons of examples of that out there. So let's break really quickly. I'm so excited. We have so many more questions for you, and we will come right back. Ever wonder what you should be feeding your dog? I always say the best dog food is the one your dog will eat, that you can afford, and that your vet approves of. That's why we love Optimal here at Juniper. Their food meets European quality standards and is full of prebiotics, omegas, and superfoods that your dog will love. To save 20% with your Juniper discount, visit the link in our show notes. Okay, we're back with Kassidi.
So before the break, we were talking about how racism in the pet space holds everybody back from helping the animals that we profess to care about so much. And something that I've learned largely from you and great books like Pitbull by Bronwyn Dickey is that when we help people, we help animals, particularly domestic animals. I mean, when we look at the history of domestic dogs and humans, we have tied our fates together so closely for tens of thousands of years at this point. And so it feels like it should be, maybe a little bit more obvious in a perfect world that helping people helps dogs. Nobody, with the exception of truly troubled people, nobody gets a pet and says, I want to not treat this animal well. Nobody gives their heart to a dog and then says, I want to not be able to care for this dog anymore. That is not at all what is happening. And I think that realizing that for me personally helped me focus some more of my efforts that I had been putting into direct pet rescue animal things on human things, because if I can help do some of that work, then the care that they're able to provide their dogs, who I love so much, will also increase. When you think about the most actionable things that fellow dog lovers can do to contribute to this advocacy themselves, what are a couple of things that come to mind? Maybe someone listening is totally new to this, but we've piqued their interest and they want to know, like, what can they do next?
Absolutely. I think the most powerful thing someone can do is take their education into their own hands, do the reading, if that's your medium, or the listening or the watching or whatever you need to do to get information about this history and how we got to where we are. That takes a lot of the load off of people like me, people that are not white, working in rescue, having to answer all of these questions. And maybe they don't want to do that labor. Taking it upon yourself is really helpful. Secondly, I would say being welcoming when people that aren't part of the majority are in the room. Training classes, dog sports, dog shows, a lot of them are almost exclusively white. And for someone who is not white to show up and try to participate can be really nerve-wracking. Having a friendly face show up and just talk to them like a person can make someone more comfortable and make sure that they come back. And if they come back, they might tell people from their community to come. And that's how we open the space up. Thirdly, I would say be open to changing your mind. When I get on the internet, I am almost never saying X equals Y and that's it. There's no other way to think about this situation. And if you don't think about it like me, you're wrong. Most of the time when people disagree with me on the internet, I want to know how they came to that conclusion. I want to read what they read. I want to follow their train of thought to see if maybe there's something that I missed, because I do not assume that I know everything. I do think I know a lot. I've researched all of this stuff for a long time, but I've researched it long enough to know that there's a lot more for me to know. So I think being open to different perspectives, and you don't have to change your mind, but just being open to figuring out where someone is coming from before you shut them down.
Say it again, louder for the people in the back.
Right. You don't know everything. I don't know everything. We don't know everything.
I think that's what's exciting. Like, I think that's what I'm looking for. We talked about social media earlier in this conversation. And I think like something that pulls me in and keeps me scrolling is that I want to learn new things. And so like, I'm just getting these bits and pieces of information that aren't really learning. But in order to learn something, you kind of have to see something that the first reaction is like, wait, whoa, is that true? Because I didn't know that. Oh, okay, wait, let me be curious and read about this and find out. Like, I think if we can all approach it with a little bit more of that, whether we're reading books or watching videos online, whatever format it's in, I love that. I'm seeking out knowledge, right? But like, I think the more people can be like that, the better for both in the pet space and just in general, right? Like, what else are we looking for when we're scrolling, if not to learn something and then change a little bit, right? It's like, it's fun. It's like you get to go to a cocktail party with all these different people. Like, these were the early promises of the internet. And it's become just so much like, no, just pick a side for all these different things. So Haley and I always talk about nuance and like bringing that to Juniper, because what we found was like, or what I found when I first got my dog Addie was that I was reading so much like training. This is how you train. And then so much of it wouldn't work for us, or just talking to your dog. Here's what they can understand. Here's what they can't. There was so much that I was like, sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. There was so much, it depends. And I feel like whether we're talking about social issues or even just like actually nitty gritty dog stuff, like there's so much of this top down, I guess, paternalism type content. And we were thinking like, well, how could we write more just here's how to figure out if dog parks are right for you. Like, this is the type of content that we try to do more. So yeah, I don't know. I was reading through one of your posts about like how white supremacy shows up in the pet space with these types of things. And I don't know that I was even identifying it as that until I read that post. And I was like, yeah, those are all the things that I was sort of picking up and piecing together. The elitism, the like, this is one level of dog ownership and you're not at it. You're not good enough to do this. And then once you start seeing that in certain places, you see it everywhere. So I love your work for that. I don't want to just talk about this though. One of the projects that I love that you've done is creating this directory of content creators and businesses owned by Black folks and also people of the global majority. And that actually has been so helpful at Juniper because every first thing we did, let's ask people to write back to us. Let's ask people to respond to this form. Let's just go get everybody's white, right? Like everybody who's promoting their self. If you don't make an effort to look for it, like that's going to just be what you get when you run or start a company. We've really struggled with like, even we use a lot of stock photos and we're like, wow, we can't even find stock photos that aren't white people with their dogs. Like it's been shocking. Shouldn't be shocking, but it's been a little shocking to realize how sad and racist the pet space is. And so even coming across this directory, thank you so much for that. Tell us more about how you came up with that idea and what other projects and ideas you've been thinking of putting out in the world.
For sure. The directory was a thing that I made for myself originally. I was just saving Instagram accounts of anybody that would show someone with a dog that wasn't white, honestly. And then that kind of branched off into trying to find other Black folks that love their dogs on the internet the way that I do. And then as I started accumulating that, I thought that I probably am not the only one looking for these things. If I felt kind of a loneliness online, then I'm probably not the only one. So I turned that like saved folder into this Google sheet that's publicly accessible and linked it to my website so that mostly I did it so that Black folks could find each other, but I really loved how quickly it turned into something for everyone to use because also Black folks deserve more recognition by everyone and not just each other. So I love to hear when other folks are making use of that database. I'm currently trying to grow the spreadsheet into an online marketplace where you can shop small businesses owned by Black and brown folks, by people of the global majority largely, really by everybody, but that's who I'm building it for. It's based on transparency. So I'm not putting a Ginger's Nap stamp on everyone because people are individuals and I don't think I 100% agree with anybody on this planet on everything. But I do think it would be cool to have a way to spend your money on your pets with people whose values line up with yours. And so I wanted to make a way to make those values very transparent while you're shopping. I'm not a coder. It is taking me a long time to build this thing, but I'm hoping to have it, at least an early version of it, set up by Juneteenth. So fingers crossed.
I love that. I think that's such a great idea. And I think people are looking for ways to shop like this in the pet space. I love that. We're just using this spreadsheet. I also love that you just made it like public for everybody to use. I mean, it really literally like solved a problem for us. We were like, okay, we want to reach out to feature more people. We like to feature real dog parents on our website. And to be able to just like click through this is so great. I think people will love that for shopping too. So I'm super excited to see you launch that. Let us know if we can help with anything.
I appreciate it. And I love that you're using it. That really makes me happy. As I was talking about during the break, did not come to Instagram to build a business. So it never occurred to me. After I made it, people were like, you should be selling this link. You should be charging people $5 to be able to. Why would I do that? I made it so that people would use it. And that's why it took me so long to make a Patreon, because I really didn't want to charge anybody to learn the things that I was trying to say. On Instagram, you have to boil things down so that they can fit into this social media package. And so I still put 100% into those and make them chock full of information as much as I can. But obviously there's always going to be stuff that doesn't fit. So I made the Patreon for the stuff that doesn't fit. And that still aligns with my values. And it still makes sure to me that the people who want to know this information can get it regardless of their financial situation.
I think that approaches like that are so valuable because they stay aligned with those core values of making this information accessible, but they also acknowledge the very real and valid fact that you are a human being with a ton of responsibilities and a ton of different things pulling at you at any given time. And so there's a balance there of committing yourself to this work that you're doing on Instagram, but also you deserve a little something for that when someone is able to give it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's how I felt about it as well. There are people that were telling me that they wanted to support and they wanted an easier way to do that and a way to do that regularly. So that's what the Patreon is for. But I want everybody to know that you do not need to be on the Patreon to hear everything I have to say. The most important things I have to say, they're for everybody.
I love that. You have a nice mix, but you also have to figure out, it's like you don't want to get burnt out. You have all these other things going on. You're taking care of your dog and like getting your PhD, and then you're coming and dropping all this knowledge. You have to be supported in that. The ideal is that the community like comes together for that. I would love to know, like, where does this go in your biggest dream world? Where could this work go for you? Like, as I was watching your video on George Washington, which everybody should go watch, by the way, I already knew George Washington was like absolutely horrible. I had seen a bunch of other like videos sort of deconstructing like what we were taught in school about him and the lore around him and everything. But I had no idea about his history with dogs. Anyway, everybody go watch that video, please. So for things like that, I was watching that thinking like, oh my gosh, you should have a Netflix show. You should have something big. Like your platform needs to be really, really big so millions of people can see this. So maybe that's not like what you want, but what is a dream scenario for where this platform could go for you?
This is classic Allison just being the biggest hype woman. Like, go on Animal Planet, go on Netflix.
How can we make it bigger and go all the way with this? I love to think like that.
Yeah, I like the way the page is kind of growing with me in my capacity. I like the pace that we're at right now. I don't think that I'm ready for Netflix, but I think if I dreamed the biggest I could dream, firstly, I'd be working with Nat Geo because Nat Geo has the critter fixers, and I love those men. Those are my favorite veterinarians on television.
Oh, I haven't seen this. I have to watch this.
They're so cute. I mean, they're adult men who are very smart. They're not, but I just think their lives. I just get so happy. It's like Abbott Elementary for me, where it's just like, I'm so happy this exists. That's how I feel about their show. So I want to be on Nat Geo so that I can get invited to things with them specifically. Secondly, I want the show to be kind of like the home improvement shows. Do you remember like Move That Bus? I want that, but for like pet care. Somebody has been trying to figure out how to clip their Chihuahua's nails for 3 years. And I just got to show up with a mobile van and some qualified professionals who make that happen for free very quickly. And that's it. And then in between those little, we are helping people with stories, we also get some of the history and the backstory, the stuff that you see on the Instagram. That's my dream.
I could see you as a host of this. I would watch this.
Yes.
We know you have another year on your PhD, but like if someone comes calling after this episode, you never know.
I'll pick up. Hey.
I'll watch it. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay, Haley, do you have any other questions?
So something that you've written about specifically is pitbull hate, breed-specific legislation, and barriers to adoption have primarily to do with racism and also classism. Allison talked about this just a little bit before with some of those things that feel subtle, and then when we think about them, we realize, oh my gosh, that's what this is. Can you tell us a little bit more about this for people who don't know that history?
Absolutely. Pit bulls started as like America's dog. Well, not the first decade maybe, but definitely by World War I, World War II, pit bulls are symbols of American valor, and they're tough and they're loyal, and people consider them very good family dogs because of those things. After you get more toward the later 20th century, like toward the 1950s and 60s, these middle-class white families no longer need the guard dog in the house because they're in these insulated suburbs with only each other, and because other dogs start becoming more popular, especially having to do with media, which I find really interesting. Other popular dogs in movies start making other breeds superstars, and so people don't really want the pit bulls in the house anymore, which means there's an abundance of pit bulls available, especially through shelters. And so the Black and brown communities that are now being segregated into these low-income, underfunded, underserved communities need guard dogs and can afford shelter prices. And so you see an influx of pit bulls in Black and brown communities, again, largely having to do with protection, although it gets painted as having to do with criminal activity, but it's a lot of the time it's families wanting to keep themselves safe because they have limited options. As opposed to on redlining, they didn't have a lot of places where they were allowed to go. And so they got these loyal and really courageous dogs, which everyone knows pit bulls are at this point, to keep them and their families safe. Also, around the later part of the 20th century, you get the boom of hip hop culture, and pit bulls have already become like a mascot for the hood. So they're really prominent in hip hop culture, which further exacerbates this criminal association that the breed now has. But it's mostly just being associated with Black and brown low-income families that makes the majority, especially mainstream media, completely turn against them. They start calling pit bulls themselves criminals, as though dogs have crime, and demonizing them, saying them that they're overly violent. And if you read the newspapers at this time, it's very interesting to see how the language that they're using to describe pit bulls lines up with the language that they had been using to describe Black people, but are no longer allowed to. So you have this cultural shift where pit bulls are the bad guys. That leading up until, I would say, the early 21st century, you have the Mike Vick case. And then there's a big switch again where Black and brown folks are not qualified to have pit bulls, which are actually very good dogs because they remembered Americans' origins, where pit bulls are amazing dogs because they are. And so now we have to rescue them from all of the Black and brown folks that they have been stewarded by because we didn't want them for several decades. So then you have the process of kind of divorcing pit bulls from their associations with Black and brown folks, with Black and brown cultures, which I think has a lot to do with why you see them in tutus and the flower crowns, and you get the stories on the internet that could be true, but there's very much no way to determine whether or not they're true, where this pit bull was abandoned or was dumped here by somebody that didn't care about it and was probably, I see this a lot, probably used for fighting, just based on whatever, to get these middle-class white families to start adopting them again. Because, and there's a post on white saviorism as well, it makes this particular group feel good to do the work of saving an animal from this terrible fate of being in a Black person's house. So now that's where we are, where we're I think toward the end of the process of completely separating or doing our best to completely separate pit bulls from Black culture. But hopefully we can sway back to a middle ground where we recognize that pit bulls are beautiful, loving. Pit bulls are dogs. They're dogs like other dogs are dogs. And then still are not having to demonize Black and brown folks in the process. That's where we should be aiming.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do see a lot of the white saviorism where it can feel like I and I alone can come get this pit bull and save it and be seen as like a good person for doing this. It's a larger conversation around like, what do we get out of rescue? You know, and I think you get so much. I mean, if you love your dog and it was a good fit, you're going to feel like you got so much out of it. You shouldn't really feel the need to like make a big deal over the fact that you rescued this pit bull, right? But like rescue is great. It's always great to do, but it's like you're not special because you did it and you're a white person saving it from this bad scenario, right? So like calm down about that a little bit, you know, like when you're writing about your rescue dog and all of that. And like as white people, I think that can be helpful to take yourself out of it a little bit. Like, okay, it's always great to rescue a dog, you know, but you weren't the only one who could get this dog and give it a good home. The history is so interesting. I really didn't know. I feel like you just know what you pick up, but hearing you lay it out and the timeline is really interesting and really important for people to understand. And it also really goes to show like how great these dogs kind of have always been, right? And so we're projecting all of this social and cultural stuff onto them. They've always just been pretty much the same type of dog, you know? It shows how much we do as people.
Yeah, the timeline is so fascinating because I didn't put together in my mind how quickly breed-specific legislation starts becoming really popular and really common so soon after residential segregation housing discrimination is legally outlawed. And so breed-specific legislation becomes another way to kind of control what populations get to live where.
And continues to happen. We're currently parked in Canada right now, which has been in the limelight in recent years for BSL. And, you know, one has to ask the question, why is breed-specific legislation continuing when we have lots of evidence against it actually working? Or I suppose I should say a lack of evidence that it prevents any of these things that we're trying to prevent, like dog bites, at all. So there's obviously something more at play there, because if we were just pragmatically looking at, hey, we'd like to see fewer dog bite incidents, I think that's something everybody who loves dogs or people can get behind. You'd think that we would ask, is this thing that we're trying to do to have fewer incidents actually having the desired result? And the answer is no, pretty unequivocally is my current understanding. And yet these policies continue to be in place. So there is still a lot going on there.
I feel like we could do like 10 different episodes with all of this, with what we've chatted about today. I literally, maybe your next thing is a podcast because you have so many topics, but
oh gosh, I feel like we could sit here and talk for 4 more hours, which would be a dream, not necessarily conducive to the roughly dog walk length podcast that we are attempting to put out. The last thing, I just want to hand it over to you. Is there anything else, Kassidi, that you'd like to say that we didn't touch on that you feel really passionate about?
I think we talked about most of my passions, but mainly that the goal for my page, I think some people who are not ready to find the content that I make feel attacked. And the intention of Ginger's Naps is not to attack anybody or put anybody down. It's really to bring the dog community together a little bit more, to make it a little bit bigger, a little bit warmer. At the end of the day, I love Ginger so much. There are a lot of things historically that would have prevented us from being together, and that makes me really sad. It makes me really aware about making sure that as many people who love dogs and want to take care of a dog now are able to do that. That's what the point of Ginger Snaps is.
You're making me emotional, properly emotional.
I know, it's really beautiful to think about it that way. And as you were saying it, I was also thinking like there is a reason like she came to you. I think there's like a reason all of our dogs came to us when they did. I really believe that that's true. And that's part of what's so magical about being able to have any kind of animal in your life. But it seems to be especially like the story with dogs. So that's amazing. Thank you for sharing all that and for teaching us everything that you teach us. And so let's tell everybody, okay, how they can support you and this work so that we can see more of this work coming out. We have the Patreon, the store. What else is there?
It's just following the page, engaging with the content, very helpful for me so that I can continue growing at an organic pace. But yeah, there's the Patreon, there's the merch. There are more designs than these two, so go take a look. And then my links like Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, those are also linked on the website. And keep an eye out for the marketplace.
Amazing. I can't wait to see it. Ooh, so excited for you. Okay, thank you so much for being on the show today. We'll link everything in the show notes. And we will talk to you soon. Thanks so much, Kassidi. That's all for today. To learn more and discover the best handpicked pet products, visit Juniper at www.juniperpet.co.